Hello and welcome back for some more stand-up action here with Matt on Just for Fun. Good evening. Tonight we're going to be playing some Naya Morph. This was sort of spawned as a team effort with Russell from the Limited Q. I don't know if anybody saw our versus video, but he was playing a teamer Morph deck. And this was, some of the idea was to lower the ticket price of the deck, and in doing so we ended up swapping colors, and also it allows you to play Mastery of the Unseen, which is interesting. So let's talk about the deck and how it works. A lot of basic lands in the mana base and some fetches just for consistency. 3-color deck really, doesn't, I mean, the mana isn't perfect, but it's often good because not only do we have all these, we have 7 fetch lands, we also have 4 of these Trail of Mysteries, which let you search for land. And, being as though our 19 creatures are all morphs and can be cast for 3 colorless, that makes it, a lot easier to get something down on time on turn 3. So common line will be Trail of Mystery into Morph, fetch a land, right? And then you've hopefully fixed your mana by that point. So lot of synergy. This deck is incredibly synergistic. It's also a bit mana hungry, which is good in a way, considering that the most expensive card in the deck costs 4 technically. The deck always has something to do with its mana, so every turn, like, it's really rare that you're not tapping out with this deck, unless you're in like a top deck war, and even then you might be tapping out for things. So even with the cards all this cheap, it's still a really mana hungry deck, something to keep in mind. So let's talk about all the various card choices. Let's talk about the creatures first. So Hidden Dragon Slayer, doing what he does, flipping up and killing siege rhinos and crap, and whatever other dragons you need slayed. Lifelink is important. There's not a ton of cards that deal damage to you here, but your deck is fairly slow, actually. Even though the mana cost is so low on everything, it's a lot of setup. But the setup has lots of big payoffs. Anyway, so this is good, helping you get back in the game, maybe, or I have cast this face up against like mono red and stuff to kind of like trade and gain 2 life kind of thing. Sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Master of Pearls is only a 2 of, but basically what this card says is pay 5 mana, win the game. A lot of the time, not all of the time. Which is why there's only 2. But very often you'll have a big ground presence, and this will help you bust through their big blocker or just kill them outright. And it's pretty great. And nobody ever expects it. That's another thing. Nobody ever plays around it or expects it. Ire Shaman is a card advantage. He would have been great as a goblin. Is that a he or a she? I can't tell if, that's a female orc. Is that what the female orc looks like? Who knows? Anyway, pretty badass card. Flips up and does that red, exile draw kind of effect that red does, and Menace is clutch. Menace is a great ability. I'm glad they keyworded it, and I hope it's evergreen. I like Menace. It's like powerful but not too powerful. It's pretty fun. This you're never gonna cast, for 2, because you always want to use the flip up ability. It only costs 1. You're adding a counter. You're making your guy a pretty good evasive threat, and you're drawing a card basically. So pretty good card. And I will speculatively flip it a lot. Also, the flipping comes in handy with Trail of Mystery, and we'll talk about that soon. Inox, I know this is a long deck tech, but there's a lot going on in this deck. Inox Survivalist, pretty simple, but every single deck you play has artifacts and enchantments. It's always good. Like, I'd say this is always the card I want to draw more than any other card in the deck. As for these creatures over here, these are like your big hitters. Ashcloud Phoenix is a nice recursive threat. You can put it out, and a lot of time I'll, because the deck is defensive, against aggro decks, basically you're trying to go over the top of an aggro deck, you'll play this, block and trade, get a 2/2, block and trade again, or if your 2/2 lives, flip it up and kill them with it, right? Something key to remember, which I always forget, is that when it turns face up, it does 2 damage to each player, not each opponent. So I have killed myself with this, unfortunately, embarrassing as it is to admit. Hooded Hydra is, the morph cost is pretty high on this one too, but again, it's when you do flip it up, it's pretty good. I have cast this as a 3 mana 1/1, embarrassingly. I've also, cast it as a 5 mana 3/3, and you die, you get a bunch of tokens, and sometimes that's enough to stave off your opponent's rush or win the game. Wild Call, if I got rid of anything from the deck, would probably be Hooded Hydra, and I'd probably put it another Survivalist and another Wild Call. In fact, I might just do that because this card has really overperformed. It's great as a 2 mana 2/2 that in this deck has a really good chance of being something with a morph ability. It's really good late in the game. It scales really well. There's a new card in Battle for Zendikar that's just an X mana XX, and I think that card is fantastic, and I think this card is similar. And it's because it does counters. Then when you flip up the creature, like you could have a really big lifelinging Hidden Dragon Slayer or really big Ashcloud Phoenix or something like that. So it's just great. I love this card, and it also, because the creature comes into play, this also triggers Trail of Mystery for the purpose of land searching. So this is the card you always want to see on turn 1. Cast this, then your morphs cost 2, and so forth. And then later in the game, it's not that embarrassing because you can flip it down. I wish that the ability read exile this and return it face down. That would be so much better, because then it would trigger Trail of Mystery. And trigger as a creature coming into play and all of those things. So it would have been a minor thing, but I think it would have made it a better card. Trail is like the key to this deck. This gives you so much card advantage. It's a totally insane card. Every time you get a creature in play, you get to search for a basic land. And also, if that wasn't enough, whenever you flip your dudes up, they get pumped, which is sometimes enough to trade up, and is sometimes enough to just kill your opponent out of nowhere, especially with Ire Shaman. 2 of these out, flip Ire Shaman up, he's like a 7/6 menace. That's something that can kill out of nowhere. Trail also combos with Molten Vortex, so that makes this read every time you cast a morph, draw the card Shock, basically. And that was something that was really impressive. Whenever Russ had those 2 cards out together, I felt like I'm gonna lose the game. So this is a very powerful combo together, and this is just great because it makes your late game land draws mean something. You don't really want to have more than 5 or whatever land in play for the most part, so later on it's not that bad. You draw land, kill something off, get in there with your dudes. Mastery, okay, this triggers Trail of Mystery Mastery, right? This is great together. That gives you a land search. So then when you have these 3 enchantments in play, you pay for this, get a 2/2, gets a land, gets a shock. It's just monumental. And then you start flipping things up, gain life, good. This is great versus control. It just gives you a never-ending stream of threats, so you don't, if it comes down to top decks, if you have this in play, it's just a tremendous advantage. So, all in all, very synergistic deck. A lot of moving parts, a lot going on. You'll get to see it in action, hopefully, and hopefully we do some fun stuff. Now, sideboard, it's kind of a weird sideboard, I know, but so versus control. I've got a Vault Breaker here because I wanted like something I could dash that's immune to sorcery speed removal. And a lot of our other cards are kind of good against control already. So not if they're control with big dudes, we have roast. If not, fine. Might bring in Arc Lighting or something to kill Planeswalker or whatever. And depending on the deck, if they don't have a lot of ways to deal with this card is just kind of like a fun board plan, because it's like if our opponent doesn't have a way to deal with it, it can just run away with the game, which I noticed a lot in limited games. This was pretty bomby, and against, believe it or not, I bring this in against aggro, and you wouldn't think a 3-mana 1/1 would be good against aggro, but if they're casting a bunch of pump spells and dudes, this is going to get bigger than they can manage to deal with really, really quick. So, Instigator is there for creature mirrors, some roasts to kill problematic dudes. Alicia is also there against aggro, which I know sounds weird, but it blocks really well on the ground, and then if you can attack with it and start getting dudes back, so it allows you to trade off all your morphs, and then a bunch of them you'll be able to get back later on. So that's the theory. At least it's worked okay so far. I know it's not the best sideboard, but it's not bad. I think I might, before I start playing, get rid of these Hooded Hydras, add the 4th Wild Call, and find a 4th Survivalist. Maybe I'll do that. Yeah. Anyway, very good. Let's see it in the games. Naya Morph. Peace.